Hey, yeah, I'm Lyndon Reed, he, him. I studied computer science at Louisiana State University. So I'm from the South, and I'm an engineer at Blizzard. I'm working on an unannounced project, on an unannounced game, and I specialize in client engineering, especially like rendering at Blizzard. And I've been working in the game industry for a while. I've also worked at EA and several different indie studios, but Blizzard's been my home for the last year and a half.
Great, thank you. Chandni?
Hi everyone, my name is Chandni Kazi, and I work as a data scientist at Great Place to Work Inc., where we try to make other workplaces more inclusive environments. My pronouns are she, her, and I went to UC Berkeley where I studied molecular and cell biology, and then went to Loma Linda University where I earned my master's in public health in biostatistics.
Thank you, welcome. Luca?
Hello, my name is Lucas Aldaini. I use he, him pronoun. I got my undergrad degree at University of Florence back in Italy in computer engineering. After that, I got my PhD degree at Georgetown University in computer science. In particular, I've done research in information retrieval and natural language processing and machine learning. Currently, I'm an applied scientist at Amazon, working on Alexa. In particular, work on question answering. So we deal with all kinds of questions that you ask to an Amazon Echo device, and we scout the web to find the best answer for your question.
Awesome, thank you. And then last but not least, Saumya?
Hi everyone, my name is Samia. My pronouns are she, her. I went to college at UC Santa Cruz, so I'm a banana slug. Majored in computer science with a focus on natural language processing. And I'm currently the co-founder and CTO of a startup in Santa Monica called Involve.
Great, thank you. So we're just gonna kick off the panel right now. Something to note is attendees, if you have any questions you wanna ask, we're not gonna do a designated Q&A at the end of the session. Instead, we're just gonna have you submit your questions to the Q&A feature on Zoom. So just go ahead and ask those questions as you have them, and we'll be sure to ask as many as we're able to. Co-host, do you have anything else to add?
I was just laughing because right when Luca said the word of the project he works on, my Amazon device like lit up and started going crazy. I don't know how many other people that happened to, but all right.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to start off with our first question. So how do you find confidence in communities where you are not the majority? And how have you responded and dealt with discrimination? So Saumya, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, of course. So discrimination is something that's pretty common. For me, the most common places where I have kind of encountered it is when I'm interacting with a lot of investors, especially here in LA. A lot of clients, the companies that Involve has are much bigger companies. I'm dealing with a lot of IT. A lot of the times, one particular case that comes to mind was people always confused me for marketing or HR. And they wouldn't, it was really hard for them to kind of digest that I run technology. So of course it comes, but I think the best way is sometimes to just roll with the punches and make kind of a joke about it. Important thing is to call it out when you see it in the best way possible, because of course there are the relations, but I usually tend to make a joke and say that, hey, that wasn't okay, for people to understand. And I think that's the best way of going about it. If it becomes really, really offensive, irrespective of whatever happens, you have to, call a spade a spade. Very recently, there was a really big client that we were working with, and the person who was talking to me continued to make very offensive sexist remarks. And we had to, at the end of the day, make a decision that, we get it, we're a small startup, but you can't do this. So we called the HR of that company and we complained, and we're like, you can't do that. And that person was actually removed from the project. We don't know if he was fired or not, but it's sometimes, there are situations where you cannot weigh the options out. You just need to make the environment safer for other people. And I kept thinking that what if it was another vendor who a woman was dealing with him and he did the same thing? So sometimes you need to stand up for the community and just roll with the punches. So I think that's the best way of dealing with it.
I will add that as someone who's male and straight passing, I often don't encounter privilege that encounter discrimination that is directed at me. It could be against one of the identity that I'm most connected with, but it's not directed at me. It might be directed to other people in the group. I've been in academic situation where I know I'm with another member of the community that identifies as LGBTQ, and it's, you know, it presents in a way that it's more easy to tell that they identify with the LGBT community. And so they will be sometimes the target of some very specific discrimination. So I think at that point, you sort of have to, as someone who's passing, or in some situation, for example, if they're targeting a trans person, not being in that community, I'm just an ally there, I can sort of use the fact that I'm in that situation to offer support and to be the person that does the calling out, instead of having an undue burden on the person who's actually on the receiving end of have to fend for themselves. There's an opportunity there of sort of, if you're on a sideline, of collecting your thought and have a more effective way to address any kind of negative discourse that's being directed at your community.
And in terms of finding confidence when you're in a room full of people who don't look like you, I try to trust that no one has the same set of experiences that I've had to get to this point. And I am an expert. You are an expert, and you have a perspective that's worth sharing, and your perspective matters. So.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize this idea of finding confidence. So I think on the second question, how do you respond when you deal with discrimination? If it's in a place where it is pervasive and consistent, I think that a lot of young scientists and engineers don't realize that they are incredibly valuable talent, and that sometimes the best thing to do is to just leave. Right? Have confidence in your own skill set and what you've learned, and realize that, you know, most places are looking for great talent, and that if you are in a bad space, don't stay too long, because you will be able to find a better place to be in. And especially if you're new or young to that and it's your first role, you feel like, oh gosh, can I really do this? Can I find another place? Have I ruined my career? No, you'll ruin your career if you stay too long in a place where you feel discriminated against.
I think being female, I get discriminated a lot when I go into meetings with executives. Many companies, with our company, we deal with major corporations. It's still a very male-dominated world in the industries I talk to. So when I walk into the room, I'm typically the only woman, or sometimes one of only two women in the entire room. And so all eyes look on me, like the woman in Hidden Figures when she walked in the room with the director and it was all men. Okay, who invited this chick to the party? You know, I mean, I don't really worry about that, but it does happen, and it's just a common bias that happens. But what I find power in that, and what I'm excited about is it's my job to get excited and inspire people by coming to the meeting prepared, offering a strong contribution to the meeting, and therefore earning the right to be a part of that meeting. So I encourage every woman who's seeking a STEM degree, you will encounter meetings where you're typically the only female or one of very few. And if you sit there in the meeting and you don't contribute, you will not get asked back and you will not get promoted. I highly encourage you to prepare for those meetings in advance so you can contribute.
Great, thank you so much. I think we've all felt like discriminated against in various ways throughout our careers as students and like internships and stuff. So it's so great to hear from you guys who are in industry who have experienced some of the similar things that we have. Yeah, Alyssa, next question.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for your responses to that one. So our next question is, what does inclusivity in the workplace look like to you? And what are some things your company has done to help foster inclusion? So we're going to go ahead and start this one off with Lyndon.
Yeah, so I like both of these questions. I think the first one, what does inclusivity look like to you, is interesting because I feel like there are kind of different levels of it. Like there's inclusivity where you just have diversity on paper. It's like, okay, there are like diverse people here. And then there's inclusivity where there's actual like intersectionality to that diversity, you know, because I know that we can think about like different ways that, okay, tech is expanding to having more than just white dudes, but maybe it's like just white women or something like that, you know, like what about women of color? What about like men of color? What about queer people and people who like exist within all of those like intersections and stuff like that. And so inclusivity starts, I feel like, with steps with that, just like having diverse people and then actually having like intersectional representation of diverse people. And then there's also, on top of that, do these people also feel like they can be themselves, like not just be there and be a face of somebody who is like not just the majority, but can they also like feel like they're expressing themselves in a way that's like you know, genuine? And then on top of that, can they also speak out when they feel like something is wrong? And I feel like that's a step where it gets to be like really, really important, because I've worked at, you know, I've been working in the game industry basically since like 2012, and that so much has like improved in the last decade in that industry. And it's gone from just like, okay, well, we have like women at this studio or whatever, to actually being like, okay, we have women who you know, feel like they can actually speak up when they feel like something is wrong. And we have like people of color who feel like that they can like call out when they feel like games aren't representing them the right way, or when we feel like the culture is not like accommodating them the right way and stuff like that. And then we also have another layer of like, are the people around them actually like listening and responding and also calling out things before people from that diversity have to call it out first, right? It's like, do we have people in the workplace or who are trans like me? And then on top of that, do we have people in the workplace who actually correct pronoun usage before that trans person has to stand up for themselves, you know? It's like, so it's not just like, do we actually have representation? It's like, are we actually actively making those represented people feel welcome? And like, do they have an outlet to speak up when things are wrong? You know, that's really, really important. And I feel like Blizzard is definitely a company that's like improved so much in the last decade with regards to inclusivity, just like the rest of the game industry. I think one of the things that's been a major recent milestone is that they've created these diversity leadership groups. They're all run by like internally by employees. It's kind of like grassroots things that employees started sometimes several years ago that are now becoming like more official organizations with a lot of like HR support and stuff like that, which is really important. And the one that I was on for, I want to say like 9 months-ish, I was on the LGBTQ network leadership group. They just recently changed names. It was like Diversity Council, and now it's Network Leadership Group. So I'm trying to like remember that they changed the name like right before I left. But this group is really cool. Like, it started originally, it was because Tracer, who's a queer character in the Overwatch game, who was like one of the first like really big name like queer characters that Blizzard had. When they announced her, they put together like a panel of queer people to like consult, to be like, hey, are we doing her story right? You know, are we representing, you know, queer people well? And are the people who work at this company going to be proud to like release this, right? Which was amazing. And so that council like of people stuck together and kept doing more stuff and actually like organizing things and like putting on events. And like most recently, like we did like a volunteer event for the LGBTQ center. We like painted a mural in their parking garage, which is like super cool. Like stuff like that, both like events inside and outside the company, or you know, things that these network leadership groups are holding and organizing. And I feel like that's really, really important. When I was at EA, actually, I was at EA prior to Blizzard, and they had like already, like when I was at EA, they had been starting up their like ERGs, their like employee resource groups, basically the same thing. Also like, you know, just employee-led groups for resources for, you know, different diverse groups of people. And I think those like employee-led groups are really amazing, because there's some things that, you know, like HR and leadership can do and think of, and then there's like totally different things that like grassroots people will actually think to like want to ask the company. And I feel like that connects back to the like, what does inclusivity look like question, which is like, you know, what actually makes, you know, inclusivity work well in a company. And when we talk about like employees having an outlet to talk about like issues that they have, I feel like employee resource groups like that are like a really important way to actually advocate for that. So yeah, that's just one of the things that Blizzard is doing, but I feel like that's one of the biggest things that we are. So
yeah, thank you.
Totally.
And I can add to that because you're one of our certified great workplaces. So your experience,
sweet.
which is amazing to see. And something that you mentioned earlier reminded me of a famous quote where diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like that kind of idea of like when you put that together. And I love your emphasis on intersectionality as well. And for me, inclusivity means two things. Recognizing that no matter who you are or what you do, you should have the same opportunities as everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is recognizing that that isn't the current reality. And whole communities are being left out of opportunities at all levels, socially, politically, and economically. And everyone has their own set of privileges that we can recognize and help other communities where we can with our voice.
Yeah, that's like one of the places where I think intersectionality is really important, is that also like anybody who is in any kind of like minority group for representation in their field needs to recognize that like we need to help the other people who are in like different groups than us too, you know?
Lyndon had mentioned the ERG groups at Siemens. We have several, and I've been privileged to be part of the Diversity Council with the Asian Cultural Exchange, and we offer several different opportunities for employees to learn about different countries, different cultures. I learned a lot about Diwali. I didn't know about that. I learned about the Lunar New Year. I mean, I learned so much in just the past couple of years where I've led I've co-chaired the Diversity Council in our company. And I highly encourage employees, if you do have diversity groups in your company, to get involved. I think it's very easy to look the other way and let other people get involved and help, but you will be so rewarded by the energy and that you gain by learning about different culture, learning about different backgrounds, and celebrating the differences that we all have. And it'll make for a better workplace and more productive workplace.
One silver lining that's come out of this crazy pandemic that we're going through is I'm seeing more cross-company ERG collaboration. And it's something that I saw happen with Twilio this month. They just launched their first one last week, and it's been amazing. You can actually go to their website and look at their ERGs, and either if you're in one that's related to their topic, you can join, or if you're just interested in learning more, you can join. And it's really lovely to see that cross-company collaboration around employee resource groups and being there for each other.
I want to echo the same point of exploring diversity initiatives outside your own company. My role in my organization, I live on the edge between academia and industry. I do research that I publish in academia, and then I do industry work for my company. And so I interact with both community, and I found that the best form of community that I have is through the academic means. I want to plug it, an amazing organization called QueerAI that does basically brings under a single umbrella people who identify as queer and are doing work in machine learning or artificial intelligence. And I think it's really powerful to see the different perspective that you get from people who are in this organization and they're part of academia. They're professors, PhD students, or researcher in more the academic field. You have industry people. They organize panels where on topics that are relevant to the LGBT community, and you have different perspective and how different aspects of different topics impact both industry and academia. One of the latest one they organized, one of the conferences, I think it was ICLEAR last year, they had a seminar on the issue of gender in both vision and natural language processing, and problems in representing it, incorporating it in decision making. And it's very interesting how the people with different backgrounds, people with different area of research will approach this differently, right? So if you want to get involved in both finding a community that can support you through your career, or simply want to learn how to critically look at some aspects of your field with a critical eye, these cross companies or cross organization groups are fantastic. You learn, you just have such a diverse background that comes in the same place, and they're great opportunities.
Yeah, and I wanted to echo what Chandni said, because having a great culture, especially during this COVID environment, is really allowing for a lot more inclusivity. And, people are starting to celebrate each other a little more, because you get a little, hidden window into each other's homes, meeting each other's families and pets and all of that. A quick anecdote, what I saw actually a couple of days ago with my team. So I've got a team that I think most of them are bilingual, at least some are trilingual. So they have like these regular stand-ups where, they have like these meeting notes and they discuss it. And right on top, every day I started seeing everybody put like one random word, which is like cat or rat or bat or something like very simple. And everyone in the team wrote what the translation is in their language. So we have Hindi, Russian, Farsi, English. So everybody's kind of teaching each other their native language. And that is something that was just like this little thing that spread in our company. But it was really positive to see, because they're all celebrating each other in a small way. And, everybody gets to show off a little bit of themselves, which was really incredibly positive.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's nice to hear that like there are some silver linings in this whole shelter-in-place pandemic. So stories like that are really inspiring too. And then Luca, I also wanted to say, if you wanted to actually type the link to the group that you were talking about in the chat box, you could be able to share it with all of the attendees, because I know that I'm sure people would be interested in checking that out. So thank you guys so much.
Problem.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for your response to that question. Okay, Spurthy, do you want to go to question 3?
Yeah. So the next question is, can you talk about a time you experienced failure and how did you use it to grow and pursue new opportunities? And if we could start off with Chandni.
Yeah, of course. Oh man, I could have a whole CV of just failures to discuss for days, including getting rejected from UCLA. So right there. One I want to talk about, though, is I was almost on academic probation at UC Berkeley. I was failing a lot of my STEM classes, my core classes, but I loved what I was studying so much, and it was such a huge disconnect, to the point I had like a different version of imposter syndrome, where everyone around me thought I was really smart and could answer questions and lead study groups, but I was failing all of the tests. And I found out later on my third year at undergrad that I actually have a learning disability. And it was because I couldn't read, when I'm timed, I don't read the words that's on a page correctly. And I end up imputing my own version of my own context. So I'm giving the right answer to the wrong question. And I kind of held that in for a while. I didn't share it with a lot of people, just mainly my siblings. And once I found out, I took the time to figure out what my learning strategies are and forgot the rest of the world and was like, this is how I learn. If I have to ask questions again, I will, and it's fine. And I kind of just released that from myself. And one of the most cathartic things I did was write a Medium post about growing up feeling dumb, and how I kind of showcased my journey. And then that actually led to TEDx Berkeley picking up my post and asking me to be on their stage and share my story with 1,000 other people, which was really hard to do. And I remember my first drafts of trying to share my story, it was filled with jokes about tacos and ramen, and just like, I realized I was kind of just using food and jokes as a way to shield from really opening up. And it was actually a coworker who I was kind of workshopping my talk, and my manager and my CEO, like everyone at my company was really excited for the opportunity, and they were really encouraging for me to share my story. And this was 6 years later from when I found out that I had a learning disability by the time I was ready to share it publicly. And I hadn't even told people at work. And but with all of that, I just wanted to share that there is a coworker who isn't a people leader, doesn't even work in my own division, but was offering to listen to my story. And he's the one who's told me, like, I feel like the story you're trying to tell is a love story with your learning disability. And that kind of hit me pretty hard. And I rewrote the entire thing a few weeks beforehand with that in mind, and really got to open up and share how I was feeling, how I felt, what it feels like. And I feel like the almost like failing out of college, having that opportunity to take that learning disability assessment and sharing my story made that a success.
Thank you for sharing that, Chandni. That was like a very nice story to have with that question.
So I want to share a little bit about failure. Since I work in venture capital, failure is sort of like part of my day-to-day, right? 90% of venture startups fail, and that's expected, right? My own personal story is I had a startup that I was a co-founder of, and it failed. And after I worked about 4 years on it, right? It didn't, I mean, we made a little bit of money, but then we never, sold the company. We didn't make our big payday. We put in a lot of money of our own resources and time, even more of our time. And I think the thing to realize about failure is that if you're not failing some of the time, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Like, you have to ultimately take risks to be able to succeed. And in my business, we talk a lot about type 1 and type 2 errors, right? Type 1 errors is if you fail and then you lose, the time that you spent on it. Your type 2 error is when you never do that thing and you have your false negative and you say, okay, I'm not going to do this. It's going to fail. You never do that. And then you lose out on your becoming Jeff Bezos, right? You lose out on that massive opportunity that could have been life-changing, right? And that's going to, you're definitely going to fail quite a few times in your life, but if you miss out on that opportunity, that is going to be life-changing. You're going to regret that a whole lot more than any of the single failures. So venture capitalists view like failure is a part of life, and you have to realize that you have to take that in stride.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your responses. We got a question from the audience, so I'm actually going to have Annie ask this live. So, sorry. Here we go. Annie?
Hi, thank you so much for answering these questions. I really appreciate all the responses that you guys have given. I was just wondering, have there ever been occurrences where you felt like you weren't good enough in your workspace? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Oh my God, all the time. That's just fact.
I mean, every day.
Every day. But yeah, I mean, it's when you're doing something difficult and, you're doing STEM, it's a difficult field, you feel that. I mean, it's very common. Some days are great and some days are not so great. And I run a startup and I have a lot of investors telling me that you suck. And then I've got a lot of clients telling me that you suck and a lot of employees telling me that you suck. It happens. And then you just have to take that in the stride. But I feel the way I think about it, because this imposter syndrome is a very real thing. And you always feel you're not good enough. And especially, as somebody who's diverse, you feel it even more strongly because you're always overcompensating. You have to think about it in the way of you're the only shot the situation has. I mean, there's nobody else who's going to solve this problem for you. There's nobody else who can live your life for you. So you're the only shot your life has. So whether it's good or it's bad, you just have to give it, your 100%. And then don't think about, what fruit that would bear. You just have to, I think about life as if I go forward and I look back at this moment, my regret would be I didn't put in my 100%. Not that it succeeded or failed, but I just didn't give it my all. I left stones unturned, or that I could have, fixed. So if you don't have that regret, in my opinion, you succeeded, whether, whatever your feelings are at that time. In retrospect, hindsight's 2020, you'll always come back and you'll feel, why was I thinking like that about myself? But in that moment, when you're like in your own head, it just feels like anybody on this planet, that person walking by on the street can do this better than me. And that's literally how you feel. But you just take one day at a time and just think about it, that you're the only shot you have.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Especially the one day at a time thing. I mean, at Blizzard, when I started at Blizzard, and this is like just a common Blizzard experience because it's such like a big name, it's a big brand in gaming, and so sometimes like working there, a lot of people who start there, they're like, why did you hire me? Like, I'm not qualified to be here. Everybody here is like so talented and smart and been making games for like 20 years or whatever, because there are people who have been there since like WoW came out in 2004 or whatever, that's a long time for video games. And so it's very intimidating, and especially when you work in tech. And I mean, a lot of people here do, and I'm pretty sure this is probably true for a lot of engineering disciplines too. Like, things move so quickly and you're constantly having to learn new skills, new APIs, new technologies, new like everything, like all the time. And so keeping up sometimes, no matter how much you learn, like there's always like something new coming out tomorrow to figure out, and every new job that you take is going to have like slightly different requirements. So I feel like keeping that in mind, just having that perspective, like that's just what our industry is like sometimes. Like, I feel like that helps. And then also like this past year, or my first year really at Blizzard, like they asked me to do a lot of performance profiling, which was something that I was like really not, and like runtime, like asset budgeting, and don't worry about the specifics of these tasks, but basically it's just stuff that I like didn't know how to do really. Like I had done a lot of like building stuff, but not a lot of like analyzing and making it performant yet in the graphics realm. And that was like terrifying because I was like, oh, this is a lot of like responsibility for this job. And like, there's some amount of imposter syndrome. Like, oh, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to learn how to do this. I don't know how everybody here already knows how to like do everything at such like a high caliber. But there's also just a legitimate amount of like, sometimes there is like some learning to do, but you can't let the imposter syndrome get in the way of your learning, And so I tried to be as brave as I could about asking for specific feedback from people that I trusted. It's like, if you're worried that you're not doing a good job, you can always just ask people, people whose opinion that you can trust. Hey, how do you think that I could do this thing better? And sometimes, they'll actually have specific feedback, and then it might sting in the moment, but it can be stuff that you can learn from. And oftentimes it'll also turn out that it's like maybe not as like big or scary as you thought. Like, they're like, oh, just do this slightly differently, get, run these numbers slightly differently, and then like your results will be improved, but like overall you've got like a good mindset. That's probably what the feedback is going to turn out to be. It's still going to be like something that just like helps you improve. And then over time you'll realize like that's just like how a lot of the learning process goes, and if you're consistently getting feedback from people that you trust, then I feel like that helps build up, at least for the logical side of your brain, like, hey, I mean, this is exactly what people have told me, and I'm going to trust their opinion, and I'm just going to keep moving forward and learning. And sometimes it's just scary the whole time, and you like, there's no like cure for the imposter syndrome, and you're just like the whole time, but at least you're like doing it and you're moving forward, and that's what's like really important. At least that's the attitude that I've taken with it, because otherwise it's like, I don't know, what else do you do? You just have to keep moving forward sometimes, and that's the best cure for it.
Absolutely. And I know that like I'm not nearly the best data scientist or have the most expertise. Like, my boss has 17 plus years of experience at the same company. But something that I realized is that, I mean, there are a lot of problems in the world and at my company. And if I can help solve one problem to make one other person's life easier at work, then that'll be my success. Like, that's a problem that existed that I can help fix. And starting companies, it's because of a problem that no one has tackled yet. and you're taking that step to believe in yourself and believe that this is a problem that needs to be corrected, and you're offering a service to do that, and that takes guts. So it's that idea that there's no shortage of problems and that you could have a unique skill set to solve some of them.
I want to bring up something that Chandni mentioned, I think at the beginning of the call, the fact that you are often the person with the most experience on the exact topic you're working on. It happens to me a lot with the fact that I do a lot of research in very active and very novel fields. At Amazon scale, it's a scale that doesn't really exist anywhere else. And so sometimes I would be in a situation where I feel inadequate because I can't solve a problem that I'm dealing with. And maybe you look around looking for help, or but then you realize that it's not because you are not adequate for the problem, it's that the problem is genuinely hard. And not only is genuinely hard, but you are the only person who has the exact skill and knowledge on the problem to solve that. So really stressing that sometimes it's not because you're not good enough, it's just the problem is hard and will require more investment. And you can have people around you that can support and that can set enough time aside for you to solve the problem. I have a great relationship with my manager who would deeply understands when I expressing that, hey, this is a hard problem, I need time to invest time and resources trying to figure out how to solve this problem and find a decent solution. But so you can help people around you to create the right environment to solve it. But just because you're failing doesn't mean that you're not good. It's just that sometimes problems are just hard.
Yeah, I like to emphasize that because, like, you know, I think the transition from going from a school environment to a work environment is that the questions you answer in a work environment are not solvable. It's not like solving a problem set where somebody knows the answer and you try to figure out what the answer is. Nobody knows that answer, right? If they knew the answer, they wouldn't be paying you to do it, right? And so sometimes you get hit with really hard problems. And I remember once I was talking with our managing partners, they wanted me to solve this sort of economics problem. I realized it was like, if I can solve this, I would win a Nobel Prize. And it was great because then they were like, well, this person's doing some research on it. And they pointed me to this article and I realized that the person working on this actually had a Nobel Prize. So I was like, accurate, if I solve this, I would have a Nobel Prize, right? And that happens, but and like, I think especially as you start becoming sort of on the sort of managing other people, you're going to come up with a lot of times when people look up to you and expect you to have an answer and, you know, hope that you have an answer. And often you have to deliver that to them with some sort of answer where, you know, you don't know the actual, you know, what if it's going to work out or not, right? But you take your best guess, and the best guess is often the best thing that you can do.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for those responses. Those were amazing. I think we have time for one last question. So if you could change a perception about your community that people have, what would it be and why? Chandni, do you want to start this off?
Great. There's two that comes to mind. The first would be that mental health is for everyone and it's not just for times of crisis. And I want people to see therapists as people you talk to on both good days and bads. It's like a regular habit that you have for your lifestyle. And that taking care of your mental health is a daily task. The other one would also be changing the perceptions of like Asian as a monolith. You know, there's so much diversity within that just one demographic option. And like even on our own survey, we have Asian as one option, and that's something that I'm trying to change. And so there's always room for improvement. And yeah, that one.
I totally agree with that Asian part. It's definitely, it's very valuable. Not every, it can be just put into like one slot for sure. For Indians especially, I mean, I really want to change the perception that we're good at math all the time. I am definitely not. That is like this obvious thing that you must be an engineer or a doctor and you must be good at math. And then they ask me to add 13 plus 2 and I don't know how to do it. So I am not one of those, and I have to be like very clear because that's a stereotype. There was once that I was talking to our development team that's based in India, And somebody asked me, they're like, oh, is that an Indian accent? And I'm like, back in India, it's just called English, you know? It's like that stereotype that Indians sound like Apu needs to definitely stop. There are jokes about it, but I personally find it really offensive, and that needs to definitely not be thought about in that way. So I literally called that person out, and I went like, do you mean that I sound like Apu? That's a stereotype. That's how we talk, you know? So I think these two definitely, and I didn't think of what Chandni just said, but I strongly agree with that.
I would agree on the Asian part of it. I would like to get rid of the stereotype of we're quiet, we're studious, get good grades, all that stuff, and we're not outgoing and can be leaders and all that. So I would like to see that, and that just requires more people of Asian descent to step up and start having a voice and being proud of that. So that's part of the reason why I contribute and get involved with as many Asian cultural events and be keynote speakers where I can and things like that. On the female community side, what I'd like to see is less of, you know, only females can support a female movement. One of the reasons why I'm on the call today is because of Bill, who's part of the IAB, which is the industry board with UCLA, recommending that women, you know, get involved and help, but he's a man, right? So he's very supportive of the women organization. So I think we can't fight discrimination with discrimination. If we really want to be successful as women, and we can learn so much from men. Part of the reason why I moved into electrical engineering is because of my father. He was a great influence on me. So what I would like to see for the female community, if we really want to be super strong and learn a lot, is to leverage the men out there that can be advocates and can support us and actually give us great feedback and leadership and mentorship. And I really appreciate Bill asking me to be on this call with this great group of people today.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. We actually have one more question from the audience, so we can quickly get that answered. Markeith, do you want to answer this live? Let me try to allow them to speak. Markeith, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello? Okay, I could just ask it for him. So his question was, how have you addressed people who view or describe expanding diversity as a threat to themselves or their advancement? Does anyone want to start us off?
That is a great question. And I get employee survey data from like tens of thousands of companies every year around the world. And I did an analysis, one looking for comments like this, and they definitely exist where it's people who have a lot of privilege who are threatened by the fact that someone else is coming in. And even though they can recognize that they are the majority, they feel like it's because of merit. And it's that myth of meritocracy that we need to combat in order to help change these perceptions for the better, to help people feel not that fear with inclusion, but really working as an ally. And ways that we do that at Great Place to Work is we work with executives at these different companies, and we really try to figure out what those infrastructural changes are. Sometimes it's not like working on like the biases of one direct person, but changing the system around you. An example that I like to share is with the orchestras in the United States. Back in the 1980s, I think the majority of the 5 major orchestras in the United States were predominantly white men. And then someone decided to turn them into blind auditions. They marketed the positions, they put up a curtain, and then also they had to put down a rug, because if the judges heard heels instead of dress shoes, they would immediately have those unconscious biases come back that women weren't good for the orchestra. And you can actually find quotes in the 1980s from conductors and directors saying they just don't think women belong there. They have worse sound. And by doing that, by adding that curtain, putting down that floor mat, they were able to increase the percentage of women by almost 40%. And it was like a really drastic change. So it's like, what does that look like for your company? What does that look like for your organizations, for the environments that you're in? What is that rug you can put down or that curtain that you can put up that won't let individual biases affect your own inclusion?
I think this is like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I think this is like a really, really good question. I feel like there are like a couple different ways to answer it, because it's like, you know, there's on the cultural level of like, how do we deal with like the people in general at, you know, our company or in our class or whatever, who are, you know, generally have a problematic attitude, versus like, what do you do if like somebody, you know, to your face is actually being like, you know, aggressively advocating against your interests or something like that. And I don't know, I mean, it's really hard either way. And I've always like, with explaining things to people in the workplace who maybe like ask dumb questions or like say dumb things or something like that, is to, sometimes it's pretending to give the benefit of the doubt. If somebody is like saying, like asking an ignorant question or wording it in a way that sounds like they are threatened, right? Like this literally this example happened so recently, but like somebody is like joining our team who uses they them pronouns, and somebody in our chat was like, they them, isn't that supposed to be plural? And nobody addressed that question. We just completely ignored that was like an obviously aggressive question that makes it sound like you don't like respect them at all, and just calmly explained like, oh no, it's just like we can use that singular for people who prefer it, who might be non-binary or just don't want to be referred to in explicitly like feminine or masculine way or whatever. And the way that person answered that question was like assuming that this person didn't have ill intent. And it's not even necessarily because like you might not know deep down that like maybe that person had like ill intent, but or maybe they didn't. Like sometimes they don't, and people just like ask questions in an ignorant way because they have no idea how to talk about these things, right? But I can't say necessarily like that I knew exactly what this person meant, you know? And so sometimes if somebody is saying something to your face that's like aggressive, I'm not saying that you have to actually like believe, because I know that that's like really hard sometimes, and sometimes you do know, but like sometimes, especially in the workplace, the best thing is to give the benefit of the doubt and to like explain things calmly in a way that like gives the benefit of the doubt that they were just coming from a place of ignorance and not malice, you know? And sometimes that's just how you have to do it. And if you do it, you know, often I feel like sometimes it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like if they maybe even secretly wanted to be mad about it, but then you respond in a calm way, it like calms them down, you know? So it's like sometimes like giving that benefit of the doubt like goes a really long way. And then also like, I don't know, if you're in a place where you feel like you're safe enough to do it, which like I felt like the leadership on my team was going to champion my pronouns when I started the team. And even though I was having trouble with that sometimes in public, and, you know, they're continuing to do that with this person who's joining the team who uses they, them pronouns. And so I just act as like normally as possible, but sometimes I just pretend like discrimination against trans people isn't a real thing, and I'll just openly talk about like being trans in the workplace, you know, because I actually started HRT while I was on this team, and so my voice dropped while I was on this team, and it's like, how do you even, there was no way not to like pretend like that wasn't happening. It was so like people kept asking me like, bro, have you been like sick for a month or something? Like, what is going on? And I was just like, no, my voice is just dropping because of puberty, man. Like, it's just second puberty, you know? And it's like, sometimes if you just like, if does not always work, if you're in a safe enough space and you feel like you can at least give that benefit of the doubt to people and just like be honest like that, sometimes people will just like follow along with what they think the culture is. And if you act like things are normal, then they'll just be like, okay, I guess I have to act like this is normal, even if they don't think that or have never encountered it before. So yeah, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. And I know that advice doesn't help if there's like somebody who is actively, you know, like being aggressive. But I think that works for like a lot of circumstances that you wouldn't think so. Even just giving the benefit of the doubt and like answering calmly sometimes like calms people down that could have been a situation that otherwise escalated. But yeah, that's a really good and hard question.
I was gonna go in the same direction that Linda went,
Nice.
in the sense that, you know, de-escalating, if possible, works well. I personally find that relying on numbers and statistics has, you know, because I know what I'm talking about there. I've studied. I know that when I say that, oh, in my community, 40% of queer scientists, you know, feel comfortable coming out to their peers at work. I know that's a hard number, and sort of like gives me confidence to go through maybe problematic discussion, problematic question that people might raise. For confrontational, I feel like there's no good one-size-fits-all advice for confrontational situation. I'm happy to see that more and more events, workplaces have very explicit direct mechanism to deal with that. So conferences, big number of conferences now have code of conducts. Even like places like GitHub now encourage you to put a code of conduct when you publish code in a repository. So there are more and more mechanisms that you can rely on for those like really bad confrontational situation. Although none of them is really perfect, but for cases where, you know, you're in a safe environment and you find someone who's you know, maybe provoking, maybe coming from a place of just not knowing, personally, I really find that hard numbers, statistics, things that I know in the back of my mind and I can offer as a support for my argument really help.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I think if that person's really close in your team that you have to work with very regularly, I think having a mediated conversation with that person might be very valuable. You know, all the characteristics, you can apply everything on how to win friends and influence people, but basically kind of talk about that I feel that this is happening. You might not mean it, but this is how this is coming across. It might be coming from a place of ignorance or bias, I'm not sure, but this is how your words are making me feel. I feel discriminated against, and I feel that you think that I'm a threat to your future opportunities, which I'm not. Sometimes there's discomfort that just arises because a person's just not comfortable with you. So it's important to address the situation, and like Luca said, de-escalate a little, try to understand where that person's coming from, and just understand that it might just be ignorance. That person just might not be acquainted with somebody like you. So I think that is, and of course, don't do it alone, because if it escalates, you need someone on your side, but it might be valuable to have someone who knows both of you and kind of understands what is happening, so that you have somebody who can diffuse like a filibuster, like in that conversation, so that if something goes really out of hand, there's number one, a witness, and number two, somebody to de-escalate the situation for you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that both of y'all made, to use the resources that are available to you if it like continues to be a problem. Because like in the example I gave, you know, somebody gave a just like chill answer to the question, even though it was like maybe an ignorant question. And then in the next time that he referred to this person in the same chat, he used they them pronouns. So it was like, oh, okay, well that like solved the problem, you know. But if like somebody else at our studio or somebody else at the company like continues to have an issue with it, then like y'all said, like having a mediated conversation, like definitely having, you know, a third party there, or, you know, if you're at a conference or something, like invoking whatever you have to that's built into the system to be able to help with stuff like that is like totally appropriate.
Cool, awesome. Marquis, thank you for that question. And just in the interest of time, we kind of have to cut this question off just because we do have a little bit of a closing here. But before we get to that closing, like, thank you guys all so much for participating in this. I know that it's really helpful for us as college students just to hear people from industry and kind of have these role models. for ourselves. So to close us off, I watched a talk that Chandni gave last week about invisible women in the workplace, and she had a really, really cool kind of statistic and study that was done, and I think that it's just a very inspiring note to end on. So Chandni is going to take over and kind of close us out with this study that she talked about. Chandni, I think you're muted still.
Right. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, great. So yes, to close us out, I just wanted to share a study that has been going on for about 50 years now. So I want you to imagine that you're 10 years old and they asked you to draw a scientist. What would you draw? Oh, and let's see. So this is what some 10-year-olds drew back in the 1960s. And what do you notice? Let's see, they have lab coats, most have glasses, some are holding Erlenmeyer flasks and test tubes, and oh yeah, they're mainly men. And this image ratio on the slide is way better than the reality back then. Back then it was 99.4% of drawings depicted men. And the colorful drawing on the bottom row was from the original study. She was one of 28 girls and 0 boys of 5,000 kids who drew a woman when asked to draw a scientist. And over the next 50 years, this test has been repeated several times and has included about 20,000 students across all grade levels. And in 2016, they found that the number went from 1% in 1960s to 58% in 2016. And as you can see from the drawings, the definition of scientist has expanded as well. And this study kind of shows us that we are making progress, and it's thanks to programs like the Society of Women Engineers. So just thank you all for having us as panelists and for changing the sheer definition of what the face of STEM looks like.
Yay, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, huge round of applause to you all. I know we all really enjoyed hearing all your responses and learning from your wisdom. So thank you guys so much and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.